"You can trust me," she said, smiling at me while cradling my newborn. I believed her. I believed both of them, until I came home early and saw what trust looks like when it's shattered. Part 1. The Guest Room. I was 32, married for 4 years, and glowing with anticipation. Our first baby was on the way. A little girl we already named Lily. My husband, Daniel, was attentive, calm, everything a man should be when his wife is throwing up twice a day and crying at TV commercials. We'd worked hard to build this life. Long hours, tight budgets, and sacrifices that most wouldn't even notice. But we were proud of what we built. A 2-bedroom cottage, hardwood floors Daniel installed himself, and a room painted soft pink for Lily. Then there was Maddie. Maddie had been my best friend since childhood. The kind of friend who saw you through breakups, awkward phases, bad bangs, and late-night panic attacks. She was my sister, in all but blood. So when she called crying one night, newly single, suddenly homeless, heartbroken, I didn't hesitate. I offered her our guest room. "Only until you find something more permanent," I said, and she agreed. Daniel was quiet when I told him, not against it, not exactly, just distant. He nodded and went back to washing the dishes, the sound of water louder than it needed to be. Within a week, Maddie was part of our household. She moved through our space like she belonged. Barefoot in the kitchen, laughter in her voice, always with a story to make Daniel smile. I didn't see it then. I didn't want to. I was too focused on the nursery, on the Braxton Hicks contractions, on choosing between diapers and formula brands. My world was wrapped in preparation for Lily. But Maddie had time. She wasn't working. She offered to help around the house. She made dinners when I was too tired, cleaned things I didn't ask her to. And Daniel, well, he started smiling more. At her stories, at her jokes. I caught them laughing together once, in the backyard, sipping something from matching mugs. I was walking slower then, heavy and sore, and I paused by the window, watching the ease between them. I told myself it was nothing. She was like a sister to me. Daniel was my husband. I was carrying his child. But that night I couldn't sleep. Something itched in my chest, something not quite right. Then came the night Lily arrived. I went into labor 2 weeks early. Daniel rushed me to the hospital, Maddie texting from home asking if she should bring anything. 12 hours of screaming pain and chaos, and finally, there she was. Lily, perfect. Screaming like the world owed her an explanation. Daniel held her, tears in his eyes. For a moment it felt like the world had shifted into place. Maddie visited the next day with flowers and a balloon that said, "It's a girl." She smiled at me, kissed my forehead, and held Lily with such tenderness that I could have cried. Everything was perfect. Everything was whole. I stayed in the hospital for 2 nights. Daniel stayed 1 night with me, then said he needed rest. Maddie offered to keep an eye on things back home. When I came home, something was different. It was subtle. The sheets were changed, but they didn't smell like our detergent. Daniel was strangely distant, tired, quieter than usual. Maddie was glowing. She looked happy. Too happy. And then came the moment I still replay every night in my mind. The moment I picked up his phone by mistake. Same model, same case. I wasn't snooping. I just thought it was mine. Until I saw her name in his messages. Until I saw what they said. Until I felt my knees give out on the kitchen floor. Part 2. The phone that broke me. I didn't want to be that wife, the kind who snoops, who breaks trust to find trust. But that night, something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the way he had fallen asleep so easily, like there was nothing hiding in his heart. Maybe it was the red scarf, still folded on the closet shelf. Or maybe it was just the quiet ache I'd been swallowing for months. I picked up his phone with shaking hands, fully expecting to find nothing. Hoping, praying even, that I'd be proven wrong, that it was all in my head. But that's not what happened. He didn't even bother deleting the messages. There they were. Her name was Julia. A string of messages under her name. Flirty, bold, intimate, photos, some clothed, some not. Videos. One of them in our kitchen laughing as he kissed her neck. My stomach turned. My hands went cold. I scrolled in silence, reading their plans, their private jokes. The cruel part was how casual it all was, like I didn't even exist. They'd been seeing each other for nearly 6 months. 6 months. That meant Valentine's Day, my birthday, Easter at my parents' place. Every single holiday she'd been in the picture, somewhere in the shadows, while I smiled and hosted and baked and believed. I dropped the phone on the bed and just stared at the ceiling. There was no rage, not yet, just numbness. A silence so loud it drowned out everything else. When he stirred next to me, I watched him sleep. I studied the curve of his lips, the rise of his chest, the softness of his features. How many nights had he looked like this while I lay awake beside a stranger? He didn't wake up. The next morning, he left for his business trip. He kissed me on the cheek. I held back a shiver. As the door closed behind him, I stood in our kitchen, staring at the breakfast I made, untouched. And then I called Julia. Yes, I called her. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just asked her one question. Did you know I was planning our anniversary? There was silence on the other end. Then, I thought you were separated. That hit harder than I expected. He had told her we were done, that we lived together for now, just until things settled, that the marriage was over in every way but paper. He lied to her, too. That was the moment I stopped crying, because something inside me snapped back into place. Some part of me, the part that used to believe in signs, in love, in happy endings, stood up and said, enough. I didn't tell her anything else. I didn't need to. I thanked her for the truth she didn't even mean to give me, and I hung up. Then I started packing. Not my things. His suits, his shoes, his favorite coffee mug. I put it all in the hallway with a note taped to the door. You don't live here anymore. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I went outside. I sat in the sun. I took Milo for a long walk. I watched the city breathe and remembered that there was a world outside of this heartbreak. By the time he returned, I was ready. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I handed him his phone and let the look on his face tell me everything. I can explain, he said. No, I replied. You can't. He stood there for a moment like a man caught between two collapsing buildings, and I realized I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel anything. I had been grieving a man who no longer existed. Now I was done. He tried to fight it, pleaded, begged, said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But the truth is, it meant everything. It meant I wasn't enough for him, that our vows, our years, our history, none of it stopped him from wanting something new. And that was all I needed to know. Part 3. Leaving quietly, not broken. The night after I kicked him out, I sat in the living room alone. No wine, no music, no calls to friends. Just me and the weight of silence. A silence I was finally beginning to understand wasn't a curse. It was freedom. It was the absence of pretending. I didn't text him. I didn't check if he got to wherever he went. I didn't need to know. His presence had already left my life long before his body walked out the door. That night, I opened the anniversary scrapbook I'd been working on. Pages of our memories, ticket stubs, photos, handwritten notes. I'd poured hours into it. Flipping through them felt like watching someone else's love story. And then I ripped it apart. Not in a rage, not with tears, just clean, deliberate cuts, because I wasn't going to mourn something that had been a lie. I started therapy 2 days later. My therapist, a gentle woman with kind eyes and a sharper mind than I expected, asked me in our first session, "When did you first feel like something was wrong?" And just like that, the dam broke, because I had known, not when I found the phone, not even when I saw how he looked at her. I had known months ago, in the way he stopped asking about my day, and how he answered with grunts, and how his hugs became routine instead of refuge. I had felt it every time I tried to touch him, and he flinched just slightly. Love doesn't rot overnight. It fades, then molds, then festers in the silence between two people who no longer see each other. He had stopped seeing me, and the part that hurt most, I had stopped seeing myself too. The healing wasn't graceful. I had breakdowns. Nights where I stared at the ceiling asking why I wasn't enough. I replayed every argument, every missed signal, every ignored instinct. But slowly, I also started waking up with a little less weight on my chest. I reclaimed small things first. I moved the furniture. I started painting again, something I hadn't touched in years. I bought new bed sheets, ones he never slept in. I cooked what I liked for dinner. I took my time. I forgave myself for staying too long, for loving too much, for not knowing sooner. People talk about heartbreak like it's a single moment, like the world explodes in one dramatic scene. But the truth is, heartbreak is quieter than that. It's not just the night you discover betrayal. It's the morning after, when the bed feels too big. It's the week later, when you reach for your phone and remember there's no good morning text coming. It's walking past your favorite cafe and realizing you can't go in without thinking of him. But healing is slow and sacred. One day I stood in the mirror and realized I didn't hate the woman I saw anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't ruined. I was becoming. Part 4. When he came back, I wasn't waiting. It was nearly 3 months later when he showed up at my door. I recognized the knock, that rhythmic tap he always used when his hands were full. I froze, keys in hand, about to leave for my therapy session. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't dressed for battle, and yet my heart braced itself like a soldier before war. When I opened the door, there he was, standing awkwardly, holding nothing but his phone and guilt. "Hey," he said softly, as if he still had the right to speak gently to me. I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. That alone told me how much I'd changed. He looked tired, older, and for the first time, I saw it. The fragility behind the confidence I used to mistake for strength. The man I once loved wasn't the same, and neither was I. "I've been thinking," he started. Of course he had. But where was this thinking when he crawled into bed with someone else? Where was this reflection when I sat across from him begging for connection, and he fed me half lies and distracted smiles? He looked at me like he expected a door to swing open, a welcome to fall from my lips. But I stayed silent. "I made a mistake," he finally said. "The biggest one of my life." I waited. He swallowed. "She meant nothing. I was lonely, confused. But I miss you. I miss us." There it was, the plea, the classic rewrite of history, as if missing someone makes the damage reversible. I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but because it felt surreal that after everything, the secrecy, the lies, the betrayal, he thought "I miss you" was the magic spell that would restore the life he shattered. "You're not coming back here," I said calmly. "Not now, not ever." He blinked. "You don't even want to talk about it." "I did months ago. You weren't listening." "I was scared." "So was I. And I still didn't betray you." He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe he didn't. Because the woman standing in front of him now wasn't begging, wasn't crying, wasn't waiting. She had rebuilt. Brick by brick, tear by tear, she had remade her life without him in it. "I'm glad you figured out you made a mistake," I said, stepping forward and locking the door behind me. "But I'm not yours anymore." And I walked away. Not dramatically, not angrily, just peacefully, because I didn't need revenge. I had something better. I had myself. Part 5. What healing actually looks like. People think healing after betrayal is about big, loud gestures. Cutting your hair, smashing dishes, making grand declarations of freedom. But real healing is quiet. It's in the slow, almost invisible victories. The first night you sleep through without crying. The first time you laugh and don't feel guilty. The first moment their name crosses your mind and doesn't ruin your day. I didn't become whole overnight. In fact, I didn't even know what whole looked like anymore. I just knew I had to try, for me, for the version of me who once believed in forever, and the version who now understood how fragile that word really was. At first, everything reminded me of him. Our favorite shows, songs, even the grocery store aisle, where he used to sneak candy into the cart when he thought I wasn't looking. I hated how often my body remembered him, even when my heart didn't want to. But then the memories began to shift. Instead of pain, they started to feel like echoes, distant, soft, manageable. I focused on routines, morning walks, warm coffee. I read books that made me feel seen. I journaled, pages and pages of messy, tear-stained thoughts that made no sense at the time but helped drain the ache out of me. I went to therapy and said things out loud I had only whispered in my mind, and somehow, the act of saying them gave me power over them. There were setbacks, nights where I hated myself for still loving him, for wondering what she had that I didn't, for scrolling through their social media even though I knew it would reopen wounds. But there were also moments of light. One afternoon I met a woman at a bookstore. She complimented the novel in my hands and we started talking. We grabbed coffee. We talked about everything except relationships. It felt refreshing to connect without the heavy weight of sorrow in the background, to be seen not as someone broken but simply someone alive. Eventually, I stopped measuring my worth by how well I could forgive him or forget what happened. I started measuring it by how honestly I could show up for myself. I stopped asking why he cheated. Instead, I asked why I stayed as long as I did after I felt unseen. That question changed everything. I wasn't the same woman he left. I had shed her skin, not because she was weak, but because she deserved more. I began to fall in love again, not with someone new, but with me, with the way I smiled after crying, with the way I refused to let bitterness take root, with the way I chose softness when the world expected hardness. Healing didn't make me forget him. It just made me remember me. And that was enough. Part 6. The first time I saw him again. It happened on a rainy Thursday. I was running late for an appointment, juggling my umbrella, my tote bag, and a lukewarm coffee that kept sloshing onto my coat. The city felt too loud, too crowded. And then, out of nowhere, I saw him. Him, my ex-husband, the man who once promised me forever and gave part of it to someone else. He was standing on the corner by the bakery we used to love, his hand loosely intertwined with hers. Her, the woman who used to call me sis and sleep in our guest room. She looked exactly the same, and yet so much smaller than I remembered. I wasn't sure if that was because she'd changed, or because I had. I froze. For a moment, I became the woman I used to be. Unsure, gutted, weak in the knees with betrayal. I watched them laugh, share a pastry, oblivious to the way the world had paused around me. My stomach churned, not with jealousy, but something sadder. Pity. For the version of me who once thought he was irreplaceable. He saw me. He did a double take like someone seeing a ghost, and the laughter on his lips disappeared. His mouth opened, unsure if he should wave, speak, or just disappear into the fog. I didn't flinch, I didn't smile, I didn't look away. I just stood tall, straightened my coat, and gave him a nod, not of recognition, but of goodbye. I walked past them. He turned to follow me with his eyes. I could feel it. Maybe he was remembering the way I used to fit under his arm. Maybe he was comparing the strength in my stride now to the way I used to hesitate when I walked beside him. Maybe he realized I had finally become someone he could no longer reach. It was poetic almost. The universe giving me closure, in the same place where we used to share late-night cravings and quiet Sunday mornings. I didn't cry. I didn't text anyone about it. I simply carried on with my day. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. They used to in the early days, at just the sound of his name. But now? Now he was just a man with a past I no longer lived in. I realized something walking away. I had spent so much time trying to avoid that exact moment. I feared running into them together, feared what it would do to me. But the truth was, it did nothing to me. And that was everything. Later that evening, I lit a candle, made my favorite pasta, curled up on the couch with a book, and smiled. Not because life was perfect, but because it was mine again. Part 7. Letters I'll never send after everything. The lies, the silence, the empty bed, the hollow apologies. I still found myself writing letters in my mind. Letters I would never send. To him. To her. To the girl I used to be. They came late at night in that quiet hour when the world sleeps but your memories pace like ghosts. So I started writing them down, not to send, but to let go. The first letter was to him. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the version of me that defended you. The woman who believed in you when you were at your worst. The one who gave up pieces of herself so you could shine. I don't miss you. I miss the illusion I built of you. And now I know, illusions can't love you back. The next was to her. You were supposed to be my safe space, my family, the one person who knew my fears and held my secrets. But you weaponized them. You stole more than a man. You stole trust. And even now I don't hate you. I pity you, because you'll always wonder if he'll do to you what he did to me. The hardest letter? To myself. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. I'm sorry I confused loyalty with self-destruction. I'm sorry I made you beg for breadcrumbs when you deserved feasts, but I'm proud of you. You survived. You're still soft, still kind, still open, and that is your strength. I keep those letters in a drawer. Sometimes I reread them, sometimes I don't. But just knowing they exist reminds me of the fire I walked through and the woman who emerged from the smoke. One day, my daughter, now 4, vibrant and fierce, asked me, "Why don't you talk about Daddy much?" I looked at her, at the way her eyes mirrored mine but held none of my old sadness. And I said, "Because some people teach us how to love. Others teach us how to leave. Your dad taught me both." She didn't fully understand, not yet, but she hugged me tightly and said, "I'm glad you're my mommy." That night I cried, not because I missed him, but because I didn't. And that was healing. The last letter I wrote was short. It was to my future self. Keep choosing peace. Keep choosing truth. And never forget, you were the storm, not the broken house it destroyed. I tucked it into the back of my journal, smiled, and finally turned the page. Part 8. The woman I am now. It's strange how healing doesn't announce itself. There's no big banner, no sudden burst of light, no one clapping for you as you finally exhale after years of holding your breath. It happens quietly. You wake up one day and the pain isn't the first thing you feel. You hear a song that once shattered you, and it just becomes background noise. You pass a mirror and recognize the woman staring back, not as the wreckage of betrayal, but as the architect of her own rebirth. That's who I am now, not a wife, not a victim, but a woman who was shattered and still chose to stand. There was a time I thought being alone meant failure, that if my marriage ended, I had somehow lost. But what I've learned, painfully, beautifully, is that staying in a place where you are shrinking just to keep someone else comfortable, that's the real loss. Now I fill my space with things that make me feel alive. Fresh flowers even when no one's visiting, jazz on Sunday mornings, long walks with my daughter where we talk about everything and nothing. I've repainted the bedroom, changed the locks, and more importantly, I've rewritten the narrative. I am no longer the woman who was betrayed. I'm the woman who left. I'm the woman who chose peace. One afternoon, I found a box in the attic. It held old anniversary cards, wedding photos, little souvenirs from a life that no longer fits. I sat there looking through memories that felt like watching someone else's film, familiar but distant. And then, without ceremony, I let them go. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need them anymore. Not to remember, not to feel, and certainly not to move forward. There's freedom in release. There's power in choosing yourself, not out of revenge, but out of reverence. And if there's one truth I want to pass on, to my daughter, to any woman walking through the ashes of betrayal, it's this. You are not the worst thing that ever happened to you. You are the fire that will rise from it. Because love is not proven by how long you hold on. Sometimes it's proven by how bravely you let go.